Yeah, I posted the link to the end of year one data population playlist. So if you want a specific or more detailed training of each of the file types, we recommend you view that. Okay. So of course, if you have a school that has departmental courses, you need to report. And especially if you have a school that is receiving CTEG funding or Perkins funding, it is most likely that you also have to submit CTE records or to report a student's CTE completion on a pathway. So that's the reason why we have the SCTE file, which I will be discussing. So for the CTE, there are LAs that have to submit this because again, you're operating a school that receive funding for CTE from the CTEG or Perkins funding. And so you have to submit students who have completed a CT pathway during the reporting year, which is included on the SCTE file. And then if a student has completed more than one pathway during the reporting year, then by all means, submit that. If you have two pathways completed, a capstone course completed this year for each pathway, then you can submit those. Your student is a high achiever. Now, there are CTE participants who are non-CTE pathway completers. So these are students who either have not finished the capstone course or is just merely enrolled in CTE courses as an elective. So those are still collected and derived from your CRSC and SCSC. You don't have to submit a CTE record for those students. Okay, so here are the data being collected. You have your CTE completer info. This is basically self-identified. So once a student completes the minimum 300 hours in a state-approved CTE pathway, which you internally would have determined, then you submit the SCTE data of that student along with the CRSC and SCSC. And why so? Because on the CRSC and SCSC, you have to account for the capstone course that the student completed. And this should have, and then the SCSC should have a C minus or better grade to back up your CTE completer determination of the student. Now, part of the CTE data is the CTE pathway code. Again, this is the industry code that the student is participating in through a pathway. And based on that CTE pathway code, there are predetermined capstone courses and state courses as an intro or concentrator course and capstone course. And so these are then validated against the CRSC. And then, of course, you have your CTE completion year, which is important because the year should be this year. So you're telling us that your student has completed the capstone course this year and essentially completed the CTE pathway. And so our assumption here is that you followed the pathway course sequence. Okay, so you can just jump report a capstone course this year, but then the student hasn't taken the concentrator course. So it essentially it didn't complete. They didn't complete the 300 hours minimum, and so you can do that. The assumption here is that your counselors has mapped the students' schedules to follow the specific program sequence. Okay, and so here are the student groups that CalPads will be determining as either a participant, a pathway completer, and basically a student who didn't complete the pathway but is essentially a participant. So this is your big circle here. And so anyone who completed a CTE course this year is a CTE participant. Okay, anyone who gets who completes a course that is not that could also be a capstone course but is not part of a pathway is considered a participant, as I mentioned here. So these are your participants who is not a CTE completer. These are the students who just who has completed a CTE course, who may or may not be participating in a pathway, and also who does not meet the CTE completer definition that I'll be explaining below. And then, of course, the information for a CT participant is reported and determined through the CRSC and SCSC records. Essentially, we'll basically able to know who the participant is just by the CRSC and SCSC records. Now, a completer, on the other hand, is someone who completed the CT pathway. And the key element here is that they completed the capstone course with a C minus or better. So the capstone course state course code is determined through the CRSC. C minus, of course, grade is determined through the SCSC. And then another layer of exclusivity is the SCTE record. So now if you submit the SCTE record with academic year of this year, you're stating that this student is a CTE pathway completer. And this differentiates this student from a mere participant. Okay. So why are we distinguishing these two? This is because if you look at the new format of the CTE reports, you will see later on that a student will be categorized as either a completer or a participant. Okay. So again, in terms of reporting of the files, this is how it's mapped. Okay. So a participant is just someone who has a CRSC reported. You submit the CTE course 7,899, and then of course you submit the student's SCSC record associated to this course. But if you do not submit an SCTE, and if this is not a capstone course, then this is just merely a participant. Or even if it's a capstone course, right? As long as you don't submit an SCTE record, CalPAS will flag the student as just a mere participant. Now, if the student is a CTE pathway completer, then you have the state course code should be a appropriate capstone course. The SCSC should be reported with a C minus or better, and then the SCT should have an academic year equal to this year. Okay. So Nate introduced you to the valid code combo document. Bring it up. Okay, so here is the valid code combinations document. This will be your Bible, so to speak, when referring to courses and determining if a state course code is valid to a pathway. So here is a sample of that. So if you go to the valid code combinations document, and the most updated version of that can be downloaded here. Okay. Sometimes CDE takes a while to format theirs to be 508 compliant. So it takes longer for the versions to be updated. So if you want the current version, click on the links at the bottom of CalPad. So if I click on valid code combos, it brings this up. I right click on that arrow and it brings up the course group master combo, which we have here. Okay. So as you can see, you have here the CT pathways. Okay. And then if you have, different pathways, there could be a potential CT subpathway. And so within each pathway, you have a specific intro, concentrator, and capstone course. Okay. And this is determined by the green and by the purple for capstone course. So if you're reporting a student as a CT pathway completer, then by all means submit the SCTE with a 102. However, you also have to account for the student's capstone course of 7132. Okay. This should go hand in hand during every reporting. Okay. If you claim that the student is a completer, there should be a corresponding SCSC flag associated to the capstone course of 7132. Otherwise, you will have certification errors. Okay, so that's how to map or at least use the valid codes combos in relation to CTE. And so let's move back to the slides. And again, this is how you do it for a CTE completer. However, for a CTE non-completer or a mere participant, you only have to report the CRSC and SCSC, and CalPAS will derive the information if the student is a participant or not. So just a quiz. If I have the valid code combinations here, what state course codes would automatically flag a student as a mere participant from these three? Okay, well, the answer is anyone here, as long as you don't submit the SCTE record, right? So just the CRSC and SCSC. Okay, so did we have any questions? If we use a state course code 7000 intro to multiple, would we have a corresponding CTE sector? Again, you have to refer to the valid code combinations document, and then also you have to have the CTE mapping user guide. Okay, I will put that on the chat box. There is a corresponding set of courses that you could use for each CTE pathway code or industry sector. So I will put that CTE user guide on the chat as a file, and that you could refer down the road. If we reported fall with state course code, college credit other, and then change it to intro to CTE 7000, do we need to revise fall submissions as well? Again, end of year is different from fall 2. Whatever you reported in fall 2, that's done. You've already certified that. Don't worry about that. Now, for end of year, if you need to do the corrections, then please do so internally, and then you could report that to CalPETS for end of year. Okay, back to you, Nate.